If everything is under control, you're not going fast enough. This was the fantastic quote that Van shared back in episode 5, and we're revisiting this and much more today. And I love this quote because it really makes me think about comfort zones. Because if we're in our comfort zones, we are not stretching ourselves, we are not challenging ourselves, and we are not growing. Something that's really important for both our professional and our personal journeys. Welcome to episode 49 of the Career Discovery Podcast, the show that's all about broadening your career horizons, discovering your professional potential, and empowering your career journey. This week, we're excited to reintroduce you to our exceptional guest from episode 5, Van, an investment manager. In this episode, we'll revisit some of the timeless and universal career insights that Van shared. We'll delve into his wisdom around adaptability, the importance of finding enjoyment in your work, and the invaluable role of mentors in helping shape your career journey. So whether you're considering a career in finance or seeking inspiration for your professional journey, join us as Van sheds light on these vital career topics and much more. Subscribe now to join us every week for fresh new episodes, engaging Q&A sessions, and if you're craving more, check out Van's full episode, backing episode 5, and our extensive back catalogue for more inspiring conversations. Now, let's jump into this insightful conversation with Van. All right, well, how about we get started? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how long you've been doing it for?
Of course, yeah. I'm Van Loo. I head the currency management team at Russell Investments, an asset manager. I also chair the rates and currency strategy group. So we make recommendations that are implemented in our portfolios. I have 22 years of financial market experience, and I've worked at a bank, a sovereign wealth fund, and now at an asset manager.
So you finished your study of economics, and then what happened?
So I probably had the choice of either becoming an academic or going into the financial industry. Yeah. Economics and the financial markets is quite a nice combination. So I took up my first job in the economic research department of a large German bank. And that was a very, very nice fit. I mean, it was a bit of fortunate coincidence because I said that I didn't have a lot of people advising me that you should do this or you should do this based on your skills profile. This is a good career. So I just looked around. I did an internship during my doctoral studies. I did an internship in corporate finance at an investment bank.
Yeah.
And one thing I knew is I didn't want to do that because it was long hours and a lot of very repetitive work. But there's also very, very exciting aspects of investment banking.
Yeah. And actually, I think that speaks to the value of internships. You might try something that you think, yeah, this is it. This is really what I want to do. Go into it, and it might show you that it's not what you want to do, and that's okay. Equally valuable at the end of it, the experience, but you just now know that you're, perhaps headed in a different direction.
Mm-hmm. I think, if anything, it's maybe more valuable that you've tried something that you wouldn't enjoy, rather than spending a year or 2 years just drudging on and doing something that you don't enjoy.
So then that was your switch from banking to asset management. So not only were you
That's
changing location, you were changing sector too. So what were the,
Yes.
I guess, what were the learnings from that transition?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's one anecdote that I can share. Actually, today is the day when the labor market report in the US gets published. It's a very important, in financial markets, very important day because it's a very important piece of data.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at the bank on the trading floor, obviously everyone was waiting for the number. As the economist, we were expected to give some commentary on it. There's lots of activity after the number, especially if it's a big surprise. People, putting on trades or changing positions or calling up clients. And then when I arrived at Russell Investments, because at the time we were much more manager of managers kind of business, we managed relatively little money directly, but it was outsourced to external parties. On the day that the job market report came out, it was like a library. No one cared because there was nothing that they could have done about it. So that was quite a change, bit of a shock.
Yeah.
But I got used to it. And these days at Russell Investments, I mean, it's changed quite a bit. So I mean, there's a bit of buzz around when important pieces of data get published.
Yeah. So maybe just a bit calmer and less shaken by global events. Am I hearing that right? Or
yes, maybe more long term, because with the bank, the traders have their book.
Yeah.
They need to manage their positions even in the very short term, whereas with an asset management company, you invest for the long term.
Yeah.
And, whether a certain number is higher and lower than expected, maybe it doesn't change your long-term outlook that much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. So looking back on that journey, from economics student to today, what have been the highs of the journey? What's gone well or what's run relatively smoothly?
I'd say, I was very fortunate with timings when I mentioned that, bit more than a year into the job, I was offered this leadership role. So that was definitely luck.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have some luck along the way. So that worked out quite well. And I think what's the most important thing, rather than, having certain job titles or certain level of compensation or number of direct reports or what things that give you status. What's more important, I think, is the job content. And in terms of the job content, I've been extremely lucky that 90% of what I've done, I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
There's 10% of the things naturally in any kind of job, some of the things you don't like so much. And maybe that leads us to the challenging stuff, like, conflict with colleagues or other, external counterparties.
Mm-hmm.
Conflict is always a bit challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, things do go wrong when you are in any kind of professional environment, and then dealing with these types of situations. I mean, can be also satisfying when you get to a good resolution, but generally speaking, I think those are the more challenging moments.
Yeah. And looking back on the journey again, what have been the challenging parts of that journey? Perhaps a failure you had to overcome or a limiting belief, for example.
Yeah, I mentioned that when I moved to London, kind of my mindset was, okay, probably going to be difficult for me to get the same kind of role, because London is a much bigger market. It's a much more competitive market. So maybe I wouldn't say I didn't have confidence in myself. I probably had a lot of confidence myself, but maybe I was a little bit disappointed at the time that, in my view, the market didn't recognize, the things that I had done before. That was definitely what you called a limiting belief, because I think you should just try to do the job you're in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And not think too much about, this is where you should be, or this is what you should have. And that the job content, and as long as you enjoy what you're doing and it's intellectually stimulating, that's the most important aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's difficult to have that mindset all the time.
Yeah, and especially in the moment. It's often when we look back that we recognize the lesson that we were supposed to learn.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can you tell us about the importance of role models, mentors, or sponsors on your journey?
Very important, yeah. I'd say that observing. So just to give an example, I mean, I knew a lot about economic theory when I came into my first job, but I didn't know anything about the practicalities of the financial markets, where to look up the price of a bond, where to look up an exchange rate. So my first boss taught me the practicalities. And then with all the other, managers and mentors I've had, it's a case of observing them, how they run a meeting, how they interact with clients, how they manage a team, that you learn. You imitate the things that you think work, and then you drop the stuff that you think doesn't work. But I've always benefited, from observing mentors. I probably wasn't that good at asking for advice explicitly. It's maybe a slight weakness.
Yeah.
But I would encourage anyone that, if maybe you don't have the opportunity to learn by observing, maybe you just reach out to someone and ask for advice explicitly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of us struggle with that, whether it's asking for somebody for help in person or over email. But, 9 times out of 10, that person's going to respond with a positive answer of course, let me help you. Let's grab coffee. I'll tell you more. Or, hey, how about you come and shadow me for a couple of hours? Or actually, this month's really tight, but next month we could do it. And I think that it's just about plucking up the courage to ask sometimes.
Exactly. I mean, most people are flattered when they're being asked for advice. So the worst thing is that they say no, no harm done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having said that, I think once you exceed that threshold, then there's a lot of other skills that become important. How you self-organize.
Yeah.
I think actually that's one of the most important things in your life, let alone your career. How you self-organize. I think, whether you follow up on things or whether you just, let things slip through the cracks, that's extremely important. What people call soft skills.
Yeah.
Like how you communicate.
Yes.
And whether you can, resolve an argument or steer a conversation into a different direction. I think it's an underestimated skill.
Yeah.
And again, the subject that you study is relevant to some extent for getting your foot in the door, but then the specifics of what you studied may be less important than self-discipline and kind of the communication skills that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. When we talk about soft skills, which, I think sometimes they are sometimes seen as less important than technical skills, but in my opinion, they're just as important, or actually in some cases even more so. So you mentioned being able to self-organize, discipline and communication. Are there any other of those soft skills that you feel have helped you be successful in this area?
And maybe I should qualify that earlier statement. Yeah, it depends on the role. There are certain roles where it's mostly about the technical skill. Like if you are a coder, like writing code that works is kind of the main thing. But actually, those types of roles are increasingly rare, where it's only about your technical skill. You always need to work with other people. So that's actually something that being able to collaborate with others in a productive way is probably one of the most important things in a professional context.
Yeah.
And also kind of conducting yourself in a way that people can trust you.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. I always think about two scenarios where maybe there's an individual contributor and they have some excellent outcome, like they make a winning trade or they win an important client. I think it's very important how that was achieved, how they conducted themselves when they achieved that, whether did they give credit to others or not, or did they steal credit from others. So I think these character aspects are super super important.
I agree.
I was listening to a YouTube video, a very old one, where Warren Buffett was speaking. He's probably the most famous investor. Investor of the last 50 years. And he was saying that the ultimate test is, for everything that you do, would you want it to be reported in the newspaper? So that should be the guiding principle. And if you wouldn't want it to be reported in the newspaper, you shouldn't do it. Yeah.
Good advice. And I really like what you talked about there, being humble. I've worked in organizations where, the success is often attributed to one individual rather than the whole team. And the culture in those organizations versus the culture in the collaborative team-based organizations that talk about we instead of me is immeasurable.
Yeah, and to take that to an extreme, I mean, if you put together your team and you say, okay, there's technical competence and whether you can trust a person, I think you wouldn't want someone who's technically very competent, but you wouldn't be able to trust.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, I remember working for an organization about 15 years ago, and there was an individual who was amazing at their job, but they treated everybody around them very poorly, but they were able to get away with that behavior because of their performance. And it's just not right.
Yeah, and it's about the culture of the organization, whether that kind of behavior is acceptable or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about helpful or essential education training and softer skills. Is there anything else that you would say to somebody who's thinking about finding out more about this career? You know, what other advice would you give to that individual?
You mentioned internships earlier, so I think that's really great advice.
Yeah.
Maybe trying to do internships in different parts of this industry.
Yeah.
I mentioned I work for an asset management company. I used to work for a bank. It's quite different. It might suit one person, but not another. So if you get the opportunity to do different internships, I think that could absolutely help you to make your career decision. I mean, I've learned that in the current generation of university students, everything starts earlier. Like in your first year, you already have to think about what they call these spring internships. Concept didn't exist when I was a university, which is some kind of taster session that you have, or a very short work experience that you have in your first year of university. That concept didn't exist when I was a university student.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, maybe taking part in these recruitment and outreach activities, is good without getting too stressed about it.
Yeah.
It's the usual suspects. If you look at the Financial Times, for example, obviously there's a big section on financial markets. Just reading that is extremely useful. But there's also supplements or specialized contributions on asset management from all the reputable financial newspapers. And then these days you don't even have to pay. I think some of these publications are probably paywalled, but you can find so much. As long as you're willing to spend a little bit of time, you can find so much by just reading the annual report of one of the big asset managers. Or, going to any kind of free YouTube webcasts. So I think there's really a lot of material that's out there for free. I think the constraining factor is not the availability of useful material. The constraining factor is that you need to spend the time to actually look into it and digest it and try to apply it to your career choice.
Yeah, that's good advice. So as we move towards wrapping up, what do you wish you'd known when you were starting out that you know now?
I wish I'd known about kind of how the industry works a little bit more. I think maybe that's what this podcast is for.
Hopefully.
But yeah, I mentioned that, my parents, my teachers, even at university, I mean, there's barely anyone who could tell me the difference between the buy side and the sell side. So this is maybe I'll try to explain very briefly. So people call asset management companies, they call the buy side, just kind of they invest the money on behalf of end investors. And then banks, exchanges, other kind of financial trading companies, what we call the sell side. They facilitate all the trading in financial markets. And, there are different functions between these two big blocks of market participants. And I wished I'd known more about what the differences are and, what kind of jobs you can perform in each of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly helps if, let's say, you have a parent that works in the industry. They can explain all this stuff to you. Or if you take part in maybe some kind of mentoring program with a financial industry professional. But if not, then you might, actively seek out one, or maybe try to network with some people who can give you advice.
Yeah, and absolutely. Hopefully, this can serve people who are looking to find out more, and perhaps we might need to do a follow-up episode where we have a Q&A with you, Van. That I think might be very useful for people.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. Yeah.
So, again, thinking back to your younger self, what advice would you give that younger self who wanted to be a writer?
Well, this is a tricky one. This is a really tricky one. I'd say that, the advice I would give is to try to use the skills that you have. In that case, writing was a skill that I had, but not to get too hung up about, in what context exactly that skill is being applied. You can enjoy certain things, and probably at a very young age, you don't have a conception of, where the skill is useful. So I think for a career, it's very important that, you enjoy what you're doing, or there's certain skills that you have and you want to apply them, and there's certain activities that you enjoy. So that's important in your career choice. But the other important aspect is there a market for it as well?
Yeah.
And to try to find that combination of it's marketable. And I don't mean it in a negative way in any sense. I think it's important that there's a demand for what you're doing, that you're able to add some value with what you're doing.
Yeah,
that's the advice that I would give myself, not to get hung up about you need to be a novelist, or you need to become a musician, or there's many ways in which the skills that a musician has can be applied in a different context.
Yeah. And I think you talk about there really just taking note of your passions, but not getting too hung up in the context you're using them in. And actually, I was listening to a podcast the other day with Jim Collins, the Good to Great, the guy that wrote Good to Great. And he was talking about when he was younger, he kept, he called it a bug book. And he just wrote down everything that he enjoyed doing. And then he looked for the patterns, so that when he was reflecting on what he wanted to do with his life, he could kind of see that. And I thought, wow, I wish I'd kept a bug book when I was younger.
Yeah. And the opposite as well. Maybe you should write down the things that you really hate, and just cut out those things, and don't choose a career that involve a lot of those things.
Yeah, that's good advice as well. I think you hear of so many people, waking up in their 40s thinking, oh my goodness, what have I been doing for the last 20 years? So you've got to enjoy what you're doing.
And it's probably better to maybe try out a few more things while you're younger, I'd say.
Yeah.
We're all still young, but while you're kind of university and a few years after that, maybe it's okay to try a few different things.
Yeah. Van, is there a favourite quote or expression that you live by, or that you particularly like?
Yeah, so actually, I knew you would ask that question. So I did pick out a quote that I've liked for a long time, actually. I'd probably say about 20 years I've liked this quote. And I'll explain the context as well. So the quote is from a racing driver, Mario Andretti. I don't know anything else about him. But the quote is, if everything seems under control, you're not going fast enough.
Ah, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So I think, well, obviously it's about motor racing, but I think it applies to professional, it's kind of stretching yourself professionally as well. So if you feel that things are, easy or that you're cruising, it's probably not where you want to, stick around for too long, because I think you want to challenge yourself, and if you don't challenge yourself, you will stagnate. So the other thing I'd say, I'm not advocating burning yourself out. So I'd be very clear about that. So that's not what's meant by, going faster and faster and faster. Yeah. It's just, stretching yourself.
Yeah. Being aware of when you're in your comfort zone and maybe you need to, step it up a gear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Absolutely.
Van, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I have found this so fascinating, and I know that the audience will too. So before we say goodbye, are there any closing words of wisdom or encouragement you'd like to leave with the audience?
I really enjoyed it. So thanks very much for inviting me. The closing remark I would have is, you don't make it by yourself. There's parents and teachers and mentors and colleagues that help you along the way. So it's always important to remember that.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Van. Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much for joining Van and I today. We really hope you enjoyed these timeless and universal career insights. If you found any value in this episode, please subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcasts. It really does help us help you. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. As you go about your week, take a moment to reflect on these lessons from Van. And if you're hungry for more insights and inspiration, check out the full episode with Van back in episode 5, or our extensive back catalogue for more inspiring conversations.